So I'll maybe just kind of get things going here. So we want to have a free-flowing discussion, Q&A, with the folks here. And just maybe to start, as I listened to the presentation and the scope of the challenges that this presents to policymakers and to governments at the federal, provincial, and municipal level. I mean, it is truly huge, the challenges that are out there. And we're about a little over 8 months away from this becoming the law in Canada. I mean, is there enough time, do you think, to do what's necessary in a regulatory policy sense, to at least have the framework out there to deal with this transition? Because it's just as I listened to you, it struck me as, boy, this is going to take a lot of effort and time and people working together to get this right. And what are the risks of not getting it right? And is it realistic to think that this can be done by July 1st of next year?
Do you want me to start? Or?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I think there's two sides to that question. From the federal government side, can we actually continue to wait? With harm still occurring to young Canadians, with the illicit market, and the number of policing hours that are invested in that market, can we actually wait to do this? From the provincial side, I understand why a lot of folks want to have an extension, but I think that there's been enough work done and being done that they'll be able to put the regulatory regime into place. And I suspect, as Jason said, and I think this is really important, we're not going to get it right. We're not going to get it correct right out of the gate. There's going to be things that we have to tweak, and there's going to be mistakes made. And because there is nothing to base this on. Unlike any other policy sector we've ever dealt with, we don't have the information. There's not enough evidence out there. There are no best practices. There's just kind of smart practices and lessons we can draw on and lessons we can learn. So I think we have to really balance those two things off of each other. And at the end of the day, I think the largest priority, again, is going back to protecting young Canadians and youth and ensuring that we're doing this in a good way. We're mitigating risk and we're reducing harm. Do you want to follow up on that, Jason?
I think, yeah, the time pressure is real, and we have to be very cognizant of it. But we also have to avoid we have to do something, and this is something, therefore we must do this. We've got to avoid that fallacy. We've got to, be careful, do it properly, and do it deliberately. We can't be running around just scrambling. I think it's got to be done right.
Yeah, in 8 months,
yeah.
It's got to be done. And the point about the policing resources that get spent on the illicit market right now, and maybe Chief Barassa could speak to this. I don't know, but
don't put him on the spot or anything.
Well, no. Okay, but my impression is that this thing has evolved over years, and there is illicit market, a huge illicit market out there, and people are using marijuana, cannabis. And I don't know how much resources the police actually put into this anymore, right? They try to maybe keep a lid on it to a certain degree, or deal with the larger, the people involved in the market and where they're from and what they're involved in. But the actual day-to-day policing of users, I don't know. I mean, that's one of the arguments for the need to act, right? Because these resources are being used improperly or don't need to be used. But I just wonder if that's the case, as it was maybe 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I just mentioned that. Yes, we have at the mic.
I'm not in a rush. I'm quite interested in everything you say. It's just I was biting my tongue off sitting up there, so I thought I might as well stand back here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no, go ahead if you have a question.
I don't know if the mic's on or not, but
should be on. Yeah, it's on. It's
okay.
on.
Only a couple. Well, I have a whole bunch, but I'll try and keep it down. Your biggest defense against the illicit market is keeping that 4 plants. If people can grow 4 plants in their house, you're going to find the illicit market mostly go away. The old potheads that still want pot, they'll grow the 4 plants. Kids can't take leaves off a pot plant and grind it up and smoke it and it work. It doesn't work that way. And the whole children danger thing. What about that bottle of booze? A child gets a hold of the bottle of booze in your cupboard and drink it, they can die from alcohol poisoning. They get a hold of your bag of weed, they might get sick, they might sleep for a couple of days. Cannabis has never killed anybody, and we seem to forget that. Like, you're talking about cannabis policy And I'm going, wow, that wonderful speech, I'm sorry, the lady in the black dress made about all the problems with cannabis. Every time you say cannabis, replace the word opioid in there. And we let people drive up and down our roads on horrible amounts of opioids. Cannabis is a way to get people off opioids. Do the research, it's there. You talk about cannabis like it's a horrible drug, but you've let alcohol into our system. When you talked about the driving, you had to include the alcohol to talk about the numbers, because you find the cannabis driving numbers are way different. Most of them are the ones going speed limit or slightly below, paranoid and doing fine. They're not the ones that are drunk and going woohoo. And you talk to any RCMP officer and they will tell you they'd rather go into a domestic dispute where cannabis is involved, and I know you'll agree with me, instead of alcohol. So you guys are making all this cannabis, and the public is making this cannabis into this big, horrible thing, when we already let opioids rule our life and ruin our youth. We've already let alcohol in. Like, come on, boys and girls. Let's kind of take a step back and look at this. It's a good plant. It's a plant. You know.
So is opium.
So is opium.
So is opium.
So is opium.
So are lots of other things that are very
opiates
damaging.
Can kill you. You show me somebody who died from cannabis.
There are at least 3 cases in Colorado.
I'd like to see the scientific evidence on that first.
2 suicides and 1 murder.
So suicide's pretty tough to blame cannabis. Sorry.
It's,
Sorry, I'm from a
it's
military
implicated.
background.
Yep,
I know what you can blame suicides on, all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, it'd be a tough push. But I'm saying compared to the opioids, compared
Yeah.
to the alcohol, how many deaths have we had
And
with
opioids
that?
remain illegal or highly controlled. They do.
Yeah, they're pushed by the doctors. My husband is off 6,500 pills a year because of cannabis. He was a walking zombie.
That's
and
great.
it was doctors that did that to him. Cannabis got him off.
Right.
Better pain control than the pharmaceuticals, but yet any doctor will give you walk into any doctor in Regina, no problem getting an opioid. Good luck getting a marijuana prescription. You know, so you've got a lot of work to do, guys, but like, don't overblow this into the horrible thing it isn't.
No, it's not. Let's not go reefer madness on this. I mean, let's keep it. But there are health risks, and to ignore them is irresponsible.
But what happened with all the health risks with alcohol? How well have we done on that? You're talking SLGA. I can't buy wine from Alberta. You know, they haven't really dealt with that well, but you want them to handle the cannabis market?
No, we don't.
I think it's exciting, the potential that the cannabis market brings with research and other things. And I would 100% agree with you on the
Obviously, an
production.
interesting subject we have. I just want to check in Saskatoon. Is there anybody there that wants to ask a question? If you do, just raise your hand.
Yeah, Dill, we have somebody here.
Okay, we'll go to Saskatoon and then we'll go back to the mic here. Go ahead, Saskatoon.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. That was a very informative talk there. And I think that, you know, what the first person might have been alluding to, there seemed to be an obvious absence of any discussion about the medical cannabis market in Canada today in this. And I know there was a nice point that one of the gentlemen, I think Jason, made about running out of the supply of cannabis, that the licensed producers don't have enough of a supply to make sure that there's cannabis once cannabis becomes legal for all people to consume. So I think that the medical market gets somewhat overlooked in that. And I think that, and again, I apologize, I made some quick notes here, but Cynthia, it seemed that your words were somewhat negative and there was no positive aspects brought about maybe the medical use of cannabis or any references about that. And I say that from a medical perspective. And if we were going to, and I'm going to ask this question to Cynthia, to look at the time when alcohol prohibition ended and alcohol became legalized and compare that to now, I don't think there was a large medical market of alcohol patients that were going to be displaced by this. So how would you appreciate medical cannabis and how those people are going to be affected? And again, I think I'm directing this question mostly to Cynthia because you were talking more about like a lot of the health things, which did sound a little bit negative sided.
Sure, thanks for the question. I think it's important to point out that the whole scope of our report was to consider the adult usage market. We weren't looking at the medical market right from the get-go. So that's part of why you've seen that side of things not really fully being addressed amongst this panel. But certainly we can recognize that in the medical world there are some definite benefits to the use of cannabis. And like any kind of pharmaceutical or medical intervention, when a patient has some health concern and they need to consider a course of treatment, they look at what the potential benefits are of that treatment, they weigh it against the side effects and the risks, and they make a decision. And when we think about cannabis being used for medical reasons, that's exactly the process that's followed. What we're talking about here and what the panel has predominantly discussed is not the medical use of cannabis. What we're talking about are people who are choosing to use cannabis recreationally and perhaps doing so not necessarily being aware that there are actually health risks associated with that. The research has time and time and again shown us that there is a real mistaken perception out there amongst our population and especially amongst our youth that people think because cannabis is naturally grown and because it is also used in the medical world that it is somehow safe or not harmful at all. And we just want people to know that this isn't really true and that there are two sides to the story for sure. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I thank you for that, but I guess it would be good to acknowledge or perhaps express that there is a there are people that are medically benefiting from this that could be displaced once the recreational market is happening. And yeah, and so again, I think that when we're comparing, and we talk a lot about alcohol, and I think it's pragmatic to use the SLGA. They've already got an infrastructure in place to manage these sort of things, absolutely. But there's almost an alcoholization of cannabis, which because it's an illicit or has been a prohibited substance, that we just look at it like it is alcohol, and we're going to just treat it like alcohol. And I think maybe that's where the people that medical cannabis come from. But comparatively speaking, when we look at alcohol prohibition and cannabis prohibition, we are talking about two quite different things. And in this presentation here, the medical argument is noticeably absent. And like I said, I guess I'm maybe I'm looking for someone to say that.
Yeah, I think we have, and your point's well taken. But again, remember the change in the regulation is not around the medical marijuana or medical cannabis. It's around recreational use.
That's what's new.
That's what's new.
By the medical users
Yeah.
is that it's going to run us out.
That's a real concern.
We need consistent
Yep.
and
High
access,
quality.
and we're really worried
Yep.
that come August.
No.
So I'm sure all
And
of
you
us,
should
all
be
of the medical
concerned.
people
Yeah.
will be stockpiling.
And,
You
and,
should
that's,
be
and we're
concerned.
pushing,
Okay,
and that's why we're pushing for the production
back
side.
to a question here in Regina, the gentleman at the mic.
Good day. I've been sitting here listening to your proposals and what you've researched, and one thing that struck me as very glaringly missing is that when you talk about education, you're educating the police services, various government departments. You're not educating the people that are going to be able to use this come next July. I'm a person who fought my doctors 2 years to try medical cannabis because I had this belief. And ethos from being in the military, not the thing to do. When I did try it, it helped some, yes. But it wasn't until my wife, because I was so messed up on those pills, started looking into the positive health benefits of cannabis. Because when your panel calls it like potheads, or it's coming next month, no matter, or next summer, no matter what, we have to be ready for it, and you're treating it like it's a disease already. Educate the people on the benefits of the health of the cannabis plant, and your provincial governments and your police services are going to save a ton of money because you won't have someone like me go back to the doctor and say, hey, doc, I need another 300 oxys to get me through the month. So, because if you educate people on the benefits of, I know people that have been smoking 60 years, but they never looked at it as a medicine. And once you start telling Granny down the block, we can make a cream to take your arthritis pain away. Like, once you educate the population of the benefits of it, the people will just act perfectly responsible and follow the lead because they don't want to lose something that's so good. I'm a veteran, and the government of Canada has been trying to take this away from me every year. I have to fight, go through lawyers to maintain my cannabis supply, only because I learned it as a medicine. It helps me with my PTSD, pain, chronic pain. I've seen combat veterans literally like, oh my God, why didn't they tell me this stuff worked 10 years ago? So if you educate the population on the benefits of the cannabis that's going to be available and say, listen, you can stop going to the hospital every effing time that you have something wrong with you. You can make your own medicine in your kitchen. That's all I wanted to say.
And I think it's a very important point. And again, it's so different than the recreational market because medical cannabis has different compositions. It is different regulatory system.
It is. It does.
It is.
It simply does. If you're treating cancer, it's CBD, not THC.
Because we're medical, and our recreational system, or our medical system is so messed up.
There's no
This
debate
gives
about
them an alternative.
Yep.
You're going to get a lot of rec people using it medically.
Yep.
It's already happening. It's already happening.
That's already happening.
I can't get civilians
Yep.
Yeah.
to prescriptions, you know?
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because if you're not at the mic, people can't hear it. But at any rate, so is there
Thank you
any
for your passion.
Saskatoon, or
Thank you
we'll
for
go
your
back to,
service.
we can stay in Regina. Is there anybody in Saskatoon?
Yeah, we have a few more questions, Dale.
Okay, we'll take one from you guys.
Speaking to. Right there. Okay, there we go. Hi, just a quick question back to the topic before about, I guess my situation is a little unique. I have imminent teenagers and a new teenager who has had a drink of beer. And I'm a little concerned as a parent. Now, I'm an advocate and a consumer for pleasure and pain, if you will. However, as I go forward and I have children coming that I have to be responsible for, I'm curious about something. There's a lot of sort of what was presented there that quite honestly scares me about consuming with respect to early consumption when the brain is developing. So first segment being that you would address the heaviest consumption, and the secondary segment, well, my kids are all in that secondary segment of the heaviest users in the country right now, at risk and are in that stage of brain development. So my question is it better or worse than a weekend choice of 6 or 8 beer? And I need to know that from a medical perspective, because I don't know that answer, because I believe that it is definitely a good choice to abstain from consumption of anything recreationally, or too often. Too much of anything is a bad thing. However, question, is it worse for my child's brain at 15, or is it better for my child's brain at 15 than a few glasses of wine or alcohol or booze or whiskey or beer? And it's really important for me to know that question, and for everybody to know that question as we go forward, because it's kind of what we're saying as a country. Yeah, it's great for medicine. Everybody believes in that. But now we're saying wine or weed. It's okay. And so teenage use, we all let our kids at 15, 16, 17, not all, some do, a little early. So is it better or worse? And I really think it's important we know that answer.
I'm very sad to report to you that I can't give you an answer that's going to satisfy you in any way. I don't think there's a person out there that could give you a full, complete answer to that question. We don't know what's worse, if a kid goes and has 6 or 8 drinks on the weekend or smokes some pot. We don't know. The thing is that's different is everybody's brain is made differently. And so for some kids who try the marijuana or try the cannabis, it's going to have a real negative impact on them that could potentially last long term. For other kids, they could probably try it and would be fine on the long-term outcome. So I think the best thing that we can do is really give the information to the kids, give the information to the youth, make sure they're informed, and make sure they can make their own decisions and look out for one another as well. There are a lot of research reports coming out of the states that have already legalized cannabis, looking at ER reports of youth that are coming in as first-time users or early users with really kind of concerning mental health issues. And I think that the information that's coming out of those states right now tells us that we can't pretend like it's not a problem. We can't, steer our kids one way or the other. They're going to experiment. They're going to make their own decisions, but we just have to give them the information so that they can make their own best choices.
And let's assume, too, when we're talking about youth using, we're talking about youth using a lot. Like, this tends to be not just once or twice. So when we're talking about these 12 to 17-year-olds, they're smoking more than, you know, once every 6 months. It's a situation where these young people are using. So just like if the young people were using alcohol, right, as opposed to, you know, go out and have 6 or 8 beer one day, 1 month, that kind of thing. So it's a little bit different, and it definitely matters, that part.
I think that's great, and thank you so much for your answer. I think we all recognize how important it is to actually get an answer to that, though. I think because socially what we're having is a major social shift, and not just in our country, not just in our province, but our whole world. Because it's sort of happening everywhere, and as this shift goes forward, very soon cannabis will not be for pleasure and pain, it'll simply be food. It'll become more a part of a dietary cannabinoid balance, and people will be consuming it for different reasons and within different foods that exist already today as an ingredient as we go forward. So perhaps we won't be having these discussions about health and sickness in the future, but something about prevention. So I'm looking forward to this as it evolves, and I think that it's just important that we get that wine or weed answer, what's better for the teenage and developing brain, because I think it's very important to know that. Thank you so much.
Good, thank you. So we'll go to the gentleman at the mic here in Regina.
Yeah, I just want your opinions on this. A lot of talk about the illicit market and having to replace that illicit market. What about bringing the illicit market into the legal fold? Tell me your opinions on that. If we don't do that, we're going to lose an unbelievable amount of knowledge, me included as a cannabis consultant, medical cannabis consultant. And just want to comment on your previous comment as well. If you're going after cancer with CBD alone, you're in big trouble.
It's not going to work? Okay, that's different information than I had, so thank you. You're absolutely correct, and we want to help. One of the things is going to be getting people with your specialized knowledge to transition from the illicit market, where you've been, obviously, I'm assuming, operating with great passion and compassion, to try and translate that and move you into a place where you're above board and have better access to, you know, better quality product and more reliable product.
So how do we do that? How do we move the right people? Don't get me wrong. There really needs to be some serious
vetting,
barriers to entry. Let's put it that way, right?
Yep. Not everybody should get to make that jump.
Exactly. If you don't know what you're doing in this industry, you will do harm. That's the way it is. So those are the barriers I'm speaking of. But I think where we really need to get to is how do we get to that point where we do transition into the legal fold.
So can I ask you a question? So what are those actual competencies that would allow somebody from the illicit market to have the knowledge and the skills and the education?
How would you screen?
That's a really good question. The first place to start would be the clinical application of cannabinoids available through TMCI Global online. That's a great starting point. You will be well served by taking that course.
Okay, I'm going to stay in Regina. Chief Barras is next, and he's been standing for a while, so I want to give him a chance to make his comments.
Thanks, Dale. And I'll give you a bit of an answer to the question that you'd asked around police resources being expended in this area. And you're right. I think it has changed over the last couple decades. Most of the resources would be expended in the area of the production and the distribution, that stream, that illicit stream there, drug trafficking, those sorts of things. In terms of enforcement activity against users of cannabis, that would generally be something that happens tangentially. We're dealing with something and someone has some in their possession, we would deal with it there. Can I give you a number of just how many resources are expended? No, I can't. But I would suggest it has decreased over time. I think people would recognize that. Now, my question, though, and I think it's kind of been hit on from a couple different angles here, but we're talking about, and I'm going to stay focused on production and distribution. And we've been involved, policing's been involved in informing at both the national and the provincial level as this whole process is sort of unfolding, and we're looking at it from an operational perspective and what works best for us operationally, and there are competing values and competing policy objectives at play here. But in terms of that, and I think the question might be to Cynthia, but I'll certainly open up to everybody. Jason, you had a smile. You might be involved in this one as well. Right now, from how I understand the process, we're going to be looking at two production and distribution streams, one for medicinal, one for recreational, if I have that. Now, there's a third one that we've talked about a lot, and that's that whole illicit stream, which we're hoping to eliminate over time. But I'm just wondering if you could sort of talk about the merits of one stream or two streams. Operationally, one stream seems to make better sense to us because it leads to less complication at an enforcement level. But if you could just talk about what the pros and cons might be with those.
Sure.
And I'll sit down.
Yeah. In our report, we've recommended a single stream, and basically what we came out with is there are far more advantages to having a single stream of distribution as opposed to having two different streams available. The advantages are in terms of organizing how we do it, enforcing to ensure that quality standards are met, and minimizing the leakage that's going to happen to the illicit market. We know that in the cannabis industry, whatever methods are used in the legal stream, there is going to be some leakage to the illicit market. And if we only have one stream to monitor and regulate, then we minimize the amount that we're losing along the way. I don't know, Jason, do you have anything to add?
Well, and it's also really important to remember that production is completely outside provincial jurisdiction. And from what we're seeing in the bill, it looks like it's going to, the licensing procedures don't seem to be radically different for recreational producers as they do for medicinal producers. At least that's not how I read the draft legislation. And it's like, okay, that seems not what we want to be doing, but those are the rules. And we don't really get a say in them.
Hello, thank you for your talk. I really enjoyed it. So in Ontario, there's 13.6 million people. They have Kathleen Wynne claimed there'll be 150 government-run pop stores. Considering rural, Aboriginals, ethnic divides, geographic, how do you reasonably expect that 150 stores will service 90,000 people each?
We don't. There is a reason why we are not recommending the Ontario model, and that's because I don't think it'll be successful. I think it will not achieve the objectives stated in the legislation. So the short answer to your question is I don't think it's going to work.
Thank you.
But why? Explain that.
Well, again, it works out to one store for every 90,000 people, and you're not where are they going to locate, right? They're going to have concentration. You're going to have lots of travel distance. You're going to have problems. We're rating right now, so you're going to get this concentration of the industry. That's right, and that's going to be
Of their own Ontario producers.
And that's going to be a different problem, and that's going to potentially cut people like yourself out of the loop, which we want to include.
So are they proposing like the same number as their current liquor?
Roughly, I believe.
Roughly. So
Is it
you're
less?
saying
Liquor,
that
not beer, liquor.
the demand for cannabis will be greater than that of alcohol? Because if the system works for alcohol, if it services the market, I'm assuming it does in Ontario, then why would it not work for?
It's not that there's more demand. Remember, you have this really sharp cut in the Ontario market between beer stores and liquor stores, right? They're not the same, and they're counting the numbers, right? They're different. Also, remember, Ontario just opened up alcohol sales to grocery stores in some situations, right? So you've got a lot of opportunities for people to have access to alcohol, and they're really restricting the access to cannabis.
Should be the other way around, exactly.
There's an argument to be made exactly for that reason, and so you want to go the other direction. And this is why I don't think the Ontario market's going to work. I don't think it's going to be successful in displacing the illicit market. So we want to do something different.
Okay, question here at the mic.
Hi, I wanted to clarify if I could some of your recommendations around the distribution model and centralizing through a single warehouse, I guess, in Saskatchewan, and the specifically around testing in Saskatchewan. Given that the federal government is proposing to retain control of the production and the packaging and the sort of safety of the source of the product. What is the advantage of having local testing, and is it reasonable to have provincial level testing and duplicating that kind of testing at the provincial level when it can be and is apparently being proposed to be done at the federal level?
Well, the short answer is I don't think it's a duplication, because we've seen a number of recalls. There's been independent testing of producer testing, which has not been very complementary to the producers. So there is product coming through the medical streams by licensed producers which is contaminated, which doesn't meet the standards. And particularly if we're going to be in a position of importing from producers potentially outside the country to meet the shortage, to try and free up supply for medical users and other reasons, we've got to make sure that product going out is safe.
So the feeling basically is that the federal government is not performing those tests to the standards.
It hasn't worked so far to the standards that I think we would all prefer. The other reason to want to centralize, do you want to jump in on this about the economies of scale and barriers to entry thing, or do you want to?
Yeah, just that making that investment in the infrastructure for testing, as we've kind of talked about, allows us to be prepared to import and export. But it really sets up Saskatchewan or the market to be adaptable to changes. So as different products start coming through the value chain, and as edibles, as they've talked about, are going to be looked at, different things like that, having that infrastructure in place is going to allow us to respond much stronger to those changing conditions. And if we look at lessons learned from Colorado and other places, they've all commented that having a leader in the industry, having central coordination would have helped a lot to respond to those changes.
Right. They don't have a federal government involved with that process.
They don't have it.
No. But I don't know how much leadership we're getting from the federal government. We haven't had any leadership with respect to retail and distribution, so I don't expect them to take a very strong role. And speaking about the shortage of supply, there hasn't been a severe or a substantial expansion of supply, and we're seeing that the Health Canada licensed producers are gobbling up market power and gobbling up each other, and at the end of the day, that's not going to be great for consumers. So we're not really seeing that lead being taken to protect the medicinal side of the market and make sure those customers aren't displaced.
Saskatoon, anyone? No, right
No, I think we're good.
Okay, I don't know if there's anybody else here. Yep, we have somebody going to the mic.
Right now.
Yep.
If some provinces will work better than others, it might keep that illegal market in that province. And like, is there an argument for a CrossCanada approach, since it's going to be legal across Canada, unlike the States?
So
some provinces are asking for more time.
Right.
Would you ask for?
Okay, can you speak into the mic, Jason?
Oh.
Okay, very best. So you're, just to make sure I understand the question and to repeat it for everybody else, and to buy myself a little bit of time to compose an answer. You're asking, would we recommend a national approach rather than the disjoint patchwork approach we're going to get? No. It's tempting, but given how little we actually know about how this is going to unfold and how this is going to work, I think there's a lot of value to the sort of policy experiment approach. This naturally occurs, where we do it differently because we believe this is going to work better, and Ontario does it the way they're going to do it for the reasons that, whatever reasons they have, and then we can find out which way works better. And that's accidentally, that's the approach the Americans have taken, with Colorado doing it one way, with Washington State doing it differently, or Oregon doing it differently again, California, doing it in yet another way. So we're going to get to try a bunch of different things and see which way works best.
And it's probably more likely to benefit Saskatchewan small business and be able to capture those economic benefits here.
Yeah, if we went with a national approach, I can tell you who'd be driving the bus, and it wouldn't be us.
Big Health Canada producers.
Well, and that's the problem with the national approach, is they set it up to make money, and they didn't set up that whole LP system with the patient in mind. So I'm finding, like, with the LP system, I can't get enough variety for my husband.
Right.
You know, so it's a failed system set up already.
Potentially it is, but I think it's going to be less of a problem.
Well, and with the private retail, one of the advantages of having the private operators.
So just so, if anybody probably couldn't hear that, the question is getting the varieties needed, not just for medical, but for consumer demand, is going to be an issue.
Absolutely, and that was one of the motivations for looking at private retailers, is to make sure that they're going to collect.
But if we only have a single distributor, those private retailers, it's not going to matter. They only have one place to buy.
That's one of the reasons why we push for a regulated private distributor, because the incentives are going to be pushing that distributor to make sure that what's on the shelves is what consumers want.
The amount of strains to satisfy the medical patients out there is so vast that one single distributor is never going to be able to touch that. Why are we eliminating craft cannabis?
Well, we're not. We're supporting that, and the distributor is being set up to have infrastructure to promote and foster that type of craft environment here in Saskatchewan.
Can a small producer who's producing a niche strain, are they going to be able to afford the testing equipment and the dedicated quality control personnel? No, the current legislation at the federal level says unless you have a dedicated, experienced, I believe, quality control person on staff, you don't get to play, right? Single distributor who's responsible for testing and packaging takes that off your plate. No.
A single distributor with multiple producers.
Their own stuff, and you guys would test it and package it and then send it back.
Not us, but yeah, the distributor. Yeah.
From producer to distributor to retailer.
Yeah, feeding into it.
So you'd be doing the testing, the quality.
That's the idea. That's the design.
And the distributors.
Okay, I think we need to move to the mic.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We have someone at the mic here in Regina.
Mine's actually more of a comment. I was down in Ottawa at a StatCan meeting, and of course one of the things that we had is they have to figure out how to capture all of, the statistics. But on the way home, on the flight home, I ended up sitting beside somebody who had been down in Ottawa for a realtors meeting. And they had a lot of concerns about it because, which of course hadn't occurred to me, because right now they are mandated to disclose if there were ever drugs in the house, right? So, okay, my flippant remark was, well, maybe when it's legalized, then you won't have to disclose marijuana. But their comment was, well, but if you do the hydroponic, et cetera, there can be issues. So I guess my more comment is that it's a bigger issue than, it's not a very narrow issue. It's a huge, wide issue, and I think it's going to take a lot of concerted effort to address all of the issues that people have with it.
Okay. Yeah, one more question if anybody wants to join in.
Okay, I had a question. Will this report be shared with the Saskatchewan ministry responsible for cannabis? Has it been shared? Will it be shared?
Well, it's certainly available to them, and this is all part of the process of making people aware of the report and its recommendations. And hopefully, the provincial government will be reading this. That's our hope, and I'm sure they will. They just won't admit.
So this report wasn't mandated, wasn't requested?
Pardon me?
This report wasn't requested?
No, it's not. It's not a government report. Well, Kathy, you can maybe speak to the objective of this report. Why did the school decide to take this on at this time?
Well, the team was really wanting to assist in having an evidence-based dialogue to move the policy discussion forward, and solidifying some evidence around what a regulatory regime might look like. We thought was really important, and again, it's just a fascinating sector because it's brand new. Recreational or adult use cannabis is a brand new sector that just has so many opportunities to put different types of innovative policy around it. And if we look at those 5 lenses, which the report does, so it isn't just about public health, right? It's not just about public safety. It's not just about economics. It looks at this complex issue and tries to say, how do we balance all of these competing lens is how do we balance all these competing problems? And how do we ensure that we do this in a good way? So at the end of the day, that was the goal.
Yeah. Good, thanks. We have one last question here in Regina, and I think we'll call it a day. Oh, do you? Well,
My
maybe
question
we have two.
relates to the advice given to pregnant women to not use any cannabis. Because it's smoked and we have this thing called secondhand smoke, what happens to the rest of the family? Like, are they forbade from smoking at the same time? I know that there was a study done many years ago about the effects of alcohol on newborns, and it was both, it mattered whether it was the father or the mother. I mean, they both contributed. Okay,
One of the
that's my
interesting
question.
things. One of the interesting things about the States is that actually people are eating it. So it's edibles. So people are ingesting it. So women are actually ingesting it as opposed to smoking. So they're infused products. So I think that is actually more common use than, and smoking is again going to be one of the big issues that come out. But I think vaping is going to be really popular. I do think edibles, we suspect edibles will be legal a year, probably around January 1st, 2019. Then you've got all your other infused products. But let's be honest, you can order edibles online right now, no problem. Like it's just, and it's everywhere. So,
On the smoking front, let's,
Looking like gummy bears.
Yeah, gummy bears.
In the medicinal world, we never recommend smoking, obviously.
No, I mean, you're inhaling the byproducts of incomplete combustion.
Although you will not find a case of lung cancer anywhere in the world as a result of that, we still don't recommend it.
Yeah. We have one last question here in Regina.
Snuck in under the wire.
I'd actually just like to clarify, I guess, about the craft growers and the single distribution and how that's all going to operate.
It's imperative that we increase the supply of cannabis. The shortage is going to allow the illicit market to maintain a foothold, and post-legalization, once the illicit market has a foothold in the formal economy, it's going to be even more difficult, and it's going to take a lot more resources to get it out. So one of the reasons we're pushing for the single distributor is that they will have the infrastructure to support local craft producers and try to open that up. Now there's going to be some work that they're going to have to do with Health Canada, but it's a definite priority. And one of the reasons that we argued that it was a regulated private distributor was to make sure that those market forces, those profit incentives, are pushing that distributor to get the right cannabis on the shelves of retailers and make sure it's available medicinal. If there's profit to be made.
So to be doing a lot of testing.
I'm sorry?
They would be doing a lot of testing, these distributors.
Independent
of the
testing.
product.
I don't know how many they would have to do, but random independent testing, but we want to make sure it's safe. And it's just kind of a secondary benefit that testing facility can be used to reduce the barriers to entry for Saskatchewan producers.
Great, so not eliminating the craft growers.
No, supporting it. We want to support it.
Yeah. So would these craft growers have to become licensed producers?
Legally, yes.
See, that's a problem.
But that's part of the evolution of this, right? Is to try and provide. If one of the cutoffs for a craft producer is that, well, geez, I can't afford the testing facilities, if we can have the testing facilities through the distributor licensed and recognized by Health Canada, that gets pulled off the plate and it makes it easier to become a licensed producer.
But you're going to have to do that with a charge.
It's not, nothing's free.
And the single distributor is going to be, we want the single distributor to be an industry leader. And we've recommended the advisory board to bring everybody to the table post-legalization is when the advisory board is going to be more important to adapt to the changes in the market.
So I was just wondering, was a single distributor, I mean, you're going to probably charge a percentage or something.
That's the regulated part of it.
And what worries me always about one single distributor that is somewhat government influenced is it can get to the point where it can charge whatever it wants.
And we're pushing for the regulated. It would be, the government can regulate the profit on the distributor.
A monopoly in effect.
Well, I mean,
A natural monopoly.
Yeah, it's really important to remember also as the producers become more concentrated, these guys get bigger and bigger and bigger, it's going to be harder and harder for small producers to compete because they're going to have resources that you just don't. And so again, the single distributor with this mandate that we're talking about is going to be in the best possible position to help craft growers, craft producers, get their product to the consumer in a safe and legal fashion. Whereas if we go with a multiple distribution chain like Colorado, not only you've got an extra problem, right? You've got the licensing problem, but then you've also got the expense of marketing and distribution yourself, right? And that's not
and a
cheap.
lot more profit. Each distributor is going to be taking a
Well,
profit
that's
cut,
nice.
and they're going to be, having to come up with capital costs and high fixed costs. That's going to lead to a higher price.
And I suspect there's going to be packaging too.
Yep.
That
There's going to be packaging.
all of that.
They're going to want to do their own packaging.
Potentially.
Yeah. Well,
It'll probably be regulated.
The advisory board is there, and the distributor is going to work with them. We wanted to really establish something that's going to adapt.
I think we're going to have to call it
Yeah,
there.
I think so. Well, listen, I want to thank everybody for coming. It's a really interesting discussion, obviously an important subject. And hopefully the paper advances this public dialogue, right? Because July 1st is coming, and we want this to be done in the best possible way that meets all the needs out there in terms of whether it's medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, whatever. So
get the product to the people.
Exactly, and doing it in a way that's
always the
effective
goal.
and protects the public interest. So I have a couple of hands on the website.
It's on the Johnson Shama website.
If you go to the Johnson Shama website and
Under research.
under research,
Yes.
yeah, there's a PDF you can
It's big.
and there's a policy brief which summarizes it.
Do you want
Will be there
the
too.
short version?
Uh,